I know it's February, I know, but this is my January wrap up. Oh, I ain't got no earrings on. Better fix that. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are okay. I hope everyone is surviving well. Yeah. So like I said, this is my January wrap up. I actually read quite a few books in January. I'm not even sure I've got all of the books with me here to show you, but I've read quite a lot of books in January. For me anyway, I know some people out there read like loads of books every single month, but for me, I feel like I read quite a lot. Probably because the UK are on a lockdown, so I had loads of time to do that. Just before I get started, a shout out to the Black is Beautiful brand. Such a sick t-shirt. Can you see that? And they've got jackets, they've got tracksuits, they've got t-shirts, they've got masks, they've got everything. Check them out. It's always good to support black businesses, and they're just good people as well. They're just good people. Check them out if you're liking the fit. I so could never be a style influencer. Oh my God. Okay, so let me stick to books. Yeah, January wrap up. What did I read in January? I'm going to start off with one of my favourites. I will be doing a review of this one as well, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but this was 150% one of my favourites that I read in January. With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book was sick. This book was so good. And it took me by surprise. Like, I'd heard good things about it, but I hadn't read loads into it and I wasn't really sure about it, but literally loved this book. It's a young girl, she's 17, she is a teenage mum to a 2-year-old daughter, and she is a budding chef, and it's about her life or the stigma attached to being a teenage mother. It speaks about how complex it can be to be black and Latino at the same time. So it's like the merging of those cultures. It's really rich with the cultural language and the cultural references in this as well. And it made me really want to go and learn a little bit more about it. So I found it really enjoyable. One of the best things about this is it's talking about food all the time. And if you know me, you know that I'm a massive foodie, literally love food. I intend to do a few videos of me cooking some of her recipes that she has in here. I've read Elizabeth Acevedo before, but this is the first one that I've read which was not in verse, like a novel. So I think she's wicked. I think she needs to do even more of these. I'm literally obsessed with her as an author now as well. So she's gonna be one of my auto-buy authors. So with the Fire on High, 100% recommend this. I can't remember what I gave it. I'm pretty sure I gave it a 5-star because I've just been ranting and raving about this to everyone, but literally loved this book. So this was one that I was so glad that I got to in January. The next one, if you watched my January TBR, I'll link it above. If you watched that, you would see that I spoke about this one, or well, obviously I spoke about all of these. This is me just kind of going through them and telling you how they were. But this one was me reading this and reflecting back on my favourite book as a kid. And this is Scribble Boy by Philip Ridley. And I'm sorry, but just a look at this old school cover. Look at it, it's so cute. One of the most amazing things in this book is the illustrations that just stuck with me forever as a kid. Can you see that? As you can see, the illustrations are just absolutely amazing. So I read back through this, wanting to reflect on it to see if to see why this stuck with me for so long and why I loved it so much as a kid. And I loved it even more as an adult. The story still keeps me going the same way that it did when I was a kid. I'm still like, ooh, even though I knew the twist. And one thing I really liked when I read this back was the fact that I picked up on all of the themes throughout it that I wouldn't have noticed in the same way as a kid. So this book deals so much with like dysfunctional families and the effects that has on the kids. So in this book you've got Bailey, who's the boy, who's the main character, his older brother Monty, and then his dad, who they call Skipper. Now reading this back is so clear to see that Skipper is having something that is kind of like akin to a mental breakdown, and he's obviously suffering with anxiety and some form of mental illness, and it's about the effects that has on Bailey and Monty. And but then he also meets someone called Ziggy Fuzz, what a cool name, and that boy's in a wheelchair. So it's like I was reading inclusively before I even knew. It just goes to show you how non-judgmental I was a kid, because that wasn't like one of the most standout important things to me. I was like, okay, cool, Ziggy Fuzz in a wheelchair, cool. And it's kind of about how these two outsiders or loners come together and make this Scribble Boy fan club and finding acceptance together. And it's just such a beautiful story, and I really loved it, and it's written really cool. Another thing that I really found out about this as well, or that I thought as I was reading this, is it's kind of like a kind of nod to the hip hop era.
In a hip hop head, we have this boom, bam, every time.
It's kind of a nod to the hip hop culture.
Or
If anyone knows anything about hip hop, you would know that the basis of hip hop is the 4 pillars of hip hop, which are graffiti, breaking, MCing, and DJing. In this book, you've got the graffiti element massively, which is what the whole book's about. You've also got the kind of MCing characters in here. There's like a character who only speaks in rap, and there's also some breakdancing in here as well.
in the African piece, it was like this, but in hip hop, it's like this.
There isn't anything, I don't think there's any DJing in here, but there's also like loads of references to music as well. And I just thought it was really cool that it was kind of like a nod to the hip hop culture. Gave it like a little bit of a different reason that I was interested in, really, because I love hip hop and the culture and the history of it as well. Other thing is, it's for a children's book. The characters are so vibrant, so memorable. And I guess maybe it helps with the little illustrations in there, but they're so memorable and each character is very, very different. So I think it could teach a lot for young people about characters. I think I'm going to make my little sister read this one. The next one that I read that I really, really enjoyed was Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I'm sure you guys, if you're into books or if you're on BookTube or Bookstagram, you would have seen this on loads of people's sites. I'm pretty late to the game. I've got this beautiful Waterstones edition, and this book was phenomenal, literally phenomenal. I knew it was going to be good because I'd seen so many 4 and 5 star reviews, but I didn't know that it was going to cover all the subject areas that it covers, so I was literally so impressed with it. This book follows two twin sisters who live in this like black elitist town in America, like basically where it's like where black people live, but they're colorist against people who are dark skinned black. Only light skinned people live in this area, in this town. And it's about these two sisters, twins, who were born there. They go through something tragic and then they run away and they escape. And one chooses to live as a white woman. She passes, what they call passing, as a white woman. She marries a white man, and then the other sister marries a black man, and it's about their lives and how they unfold after that. But the story also then looks into their children, and there's this duality between the stories of the two sisters and then the stories of their children as well. And this book spans over, I think it's like a couple of decades, and looking at the effects of the decisions that they made and the effects that it had on their family. I literally was, I don't want to give too much away, but about halfway through the book, the focus changes from being about race to being about something else, and it's a really interesting lens to read through because it's very particular to that time. Or it really highlighted to me how in different places in America the attitudes can be completely different as well. Like I knew that, but sometimes when you read it and you see how accepting some places are, or the weird traditions that they have in other places, and America's so big and expansive, you can literally, like, there's just different people everywhere and difference in opinions, and it was just really interesting for me to read. I find the subject of passing really, really spellbinding. Googled synonyms for interesting. There's some particular bits which I found just gorgeous. The only thing I would say is that the ending of this, I don't know why, I just found it I just felt unfulfilled at the ending. Like I just, if you've read this, maybe you'll know what I mean, maybe you don't think it is, but I just found it really annoying at the end. It like nearly was happily ever after, and it nearly worked out, and then when it didn't, I was kind of like, but why? But yeah, so I did really enjoy it, but I just felt that the ending left me a little bit like, ugh, don't know. Now, one thing I'm so excited about is this should be, or I've heard, rumours and word on the grapevine that is going to be turned into a Netflix series or a film, and that is going to be so lit. I can't wait when this is done on camera. I'm really interested in how it would happen because it's kind of jumping around in the time frames and stuff, so I wonder if it would take the same form or if it would be chronological or whatever. But either way, I'm super excited for that. The next book that I read in January was Homebody by Rupi Kaur. I read this as I went through the month, like I dipped in and out of it, like a couple of poems each day here and there, because I don't like to sit down and read poetry like in a block. Like I just don't feel like that's what it's made for. It's not written like that, and therefore I don't really think that's what it's made for. So I like to dip in and out of my poetry books. As usual, Rupi came with the goods. She just is so good at writing simplistic, and when I say simple and simplistic, I don't mean like basic, like I don't mean like childlike, I mean just simple, straight to the point, and emotional pieces of writing. Now, she's quite controversial. Some people who are like, I don't mean to be rude, but like the snobby, they only read classics. Or like some people who are just, you know, like they did English literature degrees and they're like, she's not a real poet or whatever. And I get it, like it is quite simple and whatever, but I love her poetry work. And just because she doesn't, you know, write sonnets and use like really fancy language doesn't mean that her art is not worthy. I mean, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but like there's obviously a reason that people like her, do you know what I mean? So a lot of people who are successful all the time get hate, so you know, she's obviously doing something right. And like, even if she doesn't write these long poems and, you know, like that all the literary critics like love and whatever, like sometimes her poems can just be like short affirmations and they're just nice to read and little pick-me-ups. It's a nice coffee table book as well. For those of you that like a coffee table book, she's here. So yeah, I read this month, so adding that to my list. The next book that I read this month, I spoke about in my to be read. This book meant a lot to me, and I didn't read it for ages, even though it came out a while ago, because it is a series that means so much to me. When I was younger, I read Noughts and Crosses and the whole series, and I absolutely loved it, like devoured it as a kid. And then I read it again when I got to secondary school, again loved it even more, and I just think it's just so fantastic. It's such a good series. Mallory Blackburn is one of these, like, I don't know if I'd say she's underrated, but I don't always hear her spoken about with like YA fiction and things like that. So I read Crossfire, which was the latest novel in the Noughts and Crosses series. I had to do loads of background reading for this because I couldn't really remember what happened. Even though I know I love the series, I couldn't really remember what happened in the series, so I had to do loads of background reading online for this. Also, if you'd seen Noughts and Crosses on BBC, they did like a BBC version of it. So I'd watched that recently, which kind of got me back into the feeling of it. I have to say, I raced through this in the same way that I raced through the books back in the day when I was a kid. It's still got this really interesting theme running through it with the idea about race, with kind of it being in the complete opposite way round, so that, you know, it was Africans that colonized the European countries and it kind of being a completely different play. But what's really cool is that when those books were written when I was younger, that was very reflective of the time that we were at then, and this book is very reflective of the time that we're at now, and this kind of weird stage where it's like people know what they shouldn't say, they know what's kind of happened in the history, there's uprisings and things like this, but there's still racism. It's just systemic and it's just hidden and in small other parts. So this book like really brings that out, and it really like reflects on modern day racism. I was so scared that I was going to read this book and be like, oh my god, like it's rubbish, and it was going to just let me down and I was going to be upset about it, and I was scared I was just going to put me in a strop. But I read it and I was like, yes, she did it. Like, she came up to today, kept me interested, and I thought it was really good. Now, in this book, it is about Toby and Callie Rose. Callie Rose, if you remember, was the baby of the original characters, Sephi and Callum. So it's about her, but it's also about her daughter, Libby, and about her relationship with, what's his name? Troy. So it's about Libby and Troy, and kind of like this friends to enemies to potential lovers type situation, and they're kidnapped. As usual within Mallory Blackman stories or Noughts and Cross series, it's just like high drama, high energy, like loads of like conspiracies going on in the background and double crossing and things like that. So it just kept me going. And one thing I would say though, one thing I definitely would say about this book, now reflecting as an adult, the characters aren't quite as strong and lovable as what I remember. Like, I didn't leave it being like, oh my god, like I used to literally be in love with Callum, like as a character, and like I used to want to be Seffi, do you know what I mean? So I used to feel really passionate about those characters, but I didn't leave it as passionate. And I don't know if it's because I read it so quickly because I was so into it, but I didn't leave it as passionate. But one thing, I read this thinking that this was going to be like the end, but I've read this knowing that now there has to be a sequel. Like the way that this has ended, I was like, oh my god, like literally, like it was like a cliffhanger at the end of a series. Like Mallory Blackman does like the best hanging on the edge cliffhangers. You're like, what is gonna happen? And yeah, so she did an amazing job of that, and it made me remember like what it was like to read as a kid. And back then when I was like, oh my god, is the next book ever gonna come out? And like, we know when you're a kid and a year feels like your entire life. So now I'm just really anticipating the next book that she's gonna bring out to finish off this series or to carry on this series, because the way that she's written this, it's like this story could just keep going forever and ever and ever. So let's hope so. 100% would recommend Crossfire. If you haven't read the whole of the Noughts and Crosses series, I've seen some people recently like go back and read it and they were like, it's shit. I was like, what?
Who had been saying that? Who said that? Who said that? Who said that?
Like, how can you even think that? It's so good. If you haven't read the Noughts and Crosses series, check out the whole series, but this book itself was fantastic. So yeah. Okay, the last book that I read in January, I've done like a long review. I filmed a review on this, and I usually try and make my reviews, at least on Instagram, I try and make them like 2 minutes. And I looked at the film and I was like, oh my god, I'm chatting about this one book for 20 minutes. So wish me luck editing down that review. I might leave it long for YouTube. Apparently people like long videos. Long videos on YouTube, so maybe I'll leave it long. But anyway, the next book that I'm about to talk about needs no further ado, and it is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you haven't seen this book or read this book, where have you been? I feel like I'm like one of the only people around, especially on BookTube, who hasn't read this book and reviewed this book. It is so good. Like, I've read so many good books this month, I genuinely wouldn't be able to make a favourite, but because I've read this quite recently, like this is definitely up there. Like, oh, I literally love this book. This follows Evelyn Hugo, and she's talking to a young journalist about her glamorous lifestyle as a Hollywood movie star between the 50s and 80s. Is that right? Yeah. And obviously about her 7 husbands along the way. Now, I really don't want to ruin this, but there's a twist in here. And I was like, what? Like, again, with the Vanishing Half, it's, again, just like another really interesting twist that I just really wasn't expecting. And I absolutely loved it. And I feel like I'm making this really bait. I feel like I'm making this so obvious. I just wasn't expecting the twist, and I literally loved it. One thing I really liked about this is Evelyn Hugo isn't always the most likeable of characters, but I loved her. I thought she was great. I literally want to be Evelyn Hugo. I don't always read things that I said in the past, but I just found this super interesting because it's like an insight into decades that I would love to travel back to. Like, I'd love to see what it was like in 1950s Los Angeles with like glamorous film stars and stuff. I'd love to know people can manipulate the media and how they did that. And nowadays it's just, we're not really able to do that as much because, you know, social media catches you doing everything. I didn't actually love the like secondary story to this, which was about like the journalist and all of that. I didn't love that, and you'll probably see that in my review. But because I was just so over enamored with like the Hollywood glamour and Evelyn's story and going through all of her husbands, that kind of took away from the bits that I didn't like, because I like those bits loads. This could be either a film or a series, because it's like each husband could have been their own story. I would have literally read 7 books about Evelyn Hugo and each of her husbands. Like, I loved it, and it just felt like sometimes you went through each story really quickly, like, or what was happening socially and culturally at that time. It commented on it, but it didn't have time to really delve into it because it had to get through her whole life and all of her marriages. Even though I have got those like little complaints about it, I just literally loved this book, and it was really different, and it really stuck with me, and it made me sit and Google old time Hollywood stars and look at pictures of them for like 2 hours afterwards. So yeah, 100% loved this book. So these are the books. I feel like I've read another one and I just can't remember. Just can't remember. So these are the books that I've read this month. These are all of them. If I had to put them in order of which ones I enjoyed, that would be hard. Well, I'm going to put Homebody at the bottom, not because I didn't love it, I do love it, but I'm not saying poetry isn't as good as novels or fiction or non-fiction or whatever, but like I just feel like you can't really judge it, and if I was to choose, if I only had to read poetry again or this, even though I am a poet, I probably would choose stories. So, sorry Rupee, love ya, but you're at the bottom. Next, on top of that, even though I loved it for nostalgic reasons, probably Scribble Boy. I'm going to put that there because the other books were just so good this month. Now, this is where I come into a bit of a problem because I loved all of the other books. I'm going to go for Crossfire. I feel guilty. Sorry, Mallory. I'm sorry, all right? I did love ya, and I do love ya, but when it comes to ordering, these things gotta happen. Yeah, I'm putting Mallory there, not because like, I loved the book whilst I was reading it and I really, really enjoyed the story, but I'll tell you why. Even though I know I read this earlier on, I can't remember it as much. So that tells me that even though I enjoyed it, it maybe wasn't as good as the other books because it didn't stick with me the same, maybe. So that's why I'm putting it there. That's my reason anyway. Oh, this is hard. I'm gonna go for Vanishing Half next. Now, people are gonna hate me for saying this, but I'm gonna go Vanishing Half next. Maybe just because, I don't know, I don't really have a reason, but I had to choose between what I wanted, Evelyn or Vanishing Half on top. So really it would be these here. Like they both had small things about them that were wrong with them. So they're kind of like equal, if we say. These two are equal, but if I had to put it, I'd probably put this one. No, gonna have to be that one. I don't know, I could ruminate over that for ages. But then on top, with the Fire on High. Now that might be controversial to some people because, you know, it's not the most complex of stories, but I absolutely loved the way this was written. I loved how the characters were, the relationship between the women. I just loved it so much. So I'm gonna actually have to say, for the fact that I haven't read anything like it either, that is gonna go on top. So these are all the books that I read in January, which, you know, it's not a lot to some people, but it's quite a lot to me. So thank you for watching. If you've liked the video, then please do subscribe. If you want to buy any of these videos and you want to buy them through my affiliate link, then look down below, naughty, in the bio or whatever it's called, the description thing, because it will all be there and I'll put my affiliate links if you want to, you know, help a girl out. Yeah, if you like the video, please like it. If you like seeing any of this type of content, me chatting on, then please do subscribe. That's it. Bye.
You were a summer and afterglow.